The rain came down in sheets that October evening, turning Chicago's South Side streets into rivers of reflected neon and shadows. Emily Carter pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders as she locked the back door of Rosie's Diner, the small family restaurant where she'd worked for the past 6 years. The clock on her phone read 11:47 p.m. Another late shift. Another long day that had started before dawn and ended well after dark. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers, the kind of deep, bone-tired ache that came from standing for 14 hours straight. Emily was 38 years old, but some nights she felt twice that age. The diner's fluorescent lights flickered off behind her, leaving only the dim glow of the street lamp on the corner to guide her way home. "Night, Emily," called out Rosa Martinez, the owner's daughter, as she hurried past toward her car. "Get home safe. You too," Emily waved, watching as Rosa's taillights disappeared around the corner. Then she was alone with the rain and the quiet hum of the city at night. Emily had lived in Chicago her entire life, born and raised in these streets that most people only saw on the news when something terrible happened. But to her, this was home. These cracked sidewalks, the corner store with its flickering open 24 hours sign, the old brownstones with their stooped front steps. This was the neighborhood where she'd grown up, where she'd learned to be tough and soft at the same time, where she'd learned that survival meant keeping your head down and your heart open just enough to remember you were human. She walked quickly, her breath forming small clouds in the cold autumn air. The temperature had dropped significantly since sunset, and the rain had that icy quality that warned winter was coming sooner than anyone wanted. Emily's apartment was only 6 blocks away, a studio on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better days sometime around 1970. But it was hers, paid for with honest work and overtime shifts, and that meant something. The streets were mostly empty at this hour. A few cars passed by, their tires hissing on the wet pavement. In the distance, Emily could hear the elevated train rumbling along its tracks, carrying the last commuters home from downtown. She passed the laundromat where she did her washing every Sunday, the bodega where Mr. Chen always saved the day-old bread for her at a discount, the church where she sometimes sat in the back pew on her rare days off, not really praying but just existing in the quiet. This was her routine, her life, predictable and small, but entirely her own. She'd never married, never had children, never traveled beyond Illinois. There had been dreams once when she was younger, college, maybe becoming a teacher, seeing the ocean, but life had a way of narrowing down your options when you were born without much and had to claw your way through every single day. Her mother had passed away 3 years ago, cancer that came too fast and took too much. The medical bills had swallowed what little savings Emily had managed to accumulate. Her father had disappeared before she could remember him, just another man who couldn't handle the weight of responsibility. She had a brother somewhere in Michigan, but they hadn't spoken in 5 years, not since their mother's funeral when they'd argued about nothing and everything. So Emily was alone. She'd made peace with that. Alone but not lonely, she told herself. She had regular customers at the diner who knew her name, co-workers who traded shifts when she needed them, a landlord who sometimes let rent slide a few days when money was tight. She had her books, checked out from the library and stacks of 4 every week. She had her small routines that made life bearable. The wind picked up, driving the rain at an angle that found every gap in her jacket. Emily walked faster, already imagining the hot shower she'd take as soon as she got home, the instant ramen she'd eat while watching late-night television, the blessed relief of finally taking off her shoes and lying down. She was 2 blocks from home when she heard the sound. It wasn't the normal city noise, not the train or the traffic or the distant sirens that were always part of Chicago's soundtrack. This was different, sharp, sudden. The screech of tires pushed past their limit, rubber burning against wet asphalt. Emily looked up just as 2 black SUVs came racing around the corner, moving impossibly fast for a residential street. They weren't just speeding, they were chasing each other, the second vehicle so close to the first that their bumpers nearly touched. Her instinct was to press herself against the nearest building, to make herself small and invisible. In neighborhoods like this, you learned quickly that some things weren't your business, that curiosity could get you hurt, that the best response to danger was to look away and keep walking. But then she saw him, a little boy, no more than 9 or 10 years old, standing on the corner directly in the path of the chase. He was frozen, clutching a backpack to his chest, his eyes wide with terror. He wore a private school uniform, navy blazer, crisp white shirt, tie, completely out of place in this part of town at this time of night. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion and too fast all at once. The first SUV swerved, trying to avoid the child. The second vehicle pulled alongside it, and Emily saw the rear window sliding down. She saw the dark shape of something being raised, pointed. She didn't think. There was no time for thought, no moment of decision. Her body simply moved. Emily ran. Her tired legs found strength she didn't know she had. She covered the distance between herself and the boy in seconds that felt like hours. She could see his face clearly now. Dark hair, pale skin, tears streaming down his cheeks, absolutely petrified. "Get down!" she screamed, but her voice was lost in the chaos of engines and screeching tires. She reached him just as the sound erupted. Not an explosion, not fireworks, but something sharp and specific that cracked through the rain-soaked air. Emily grabbed the boy and turned her body, wrapping herself around him like a shield, pulling him down toward the ground. The impact hit her right shoulder, spinning her partially around. It felt like being punched by something impossibly hot and impossibly hard at the same time. The force of it drove the breath from her lungs. She and the boy went down together on the wet sidewalk, Emily taking the brunt of the fall. Pain, immediate and overwhelming. It radiated from her shoulder down her arm and across her chest. Emily's vision blurred, and she tasted something metallic in her mouth, but she kept her arms around the boy, kept herself between him and whatever was happening in the street. The SUVs were still moving, still engaged in their dangerous dance. More sounds erupted, glass shattering, metal crunching. Emily pulled the boy closer, rolling them both toward the recessed doorway of a closed storefront, trying to get them out of the line of danger. "It's okay," she heard herself saying, though she wasn't sure if the words came out right. "It's okay. I've got you. You're okay." The boy was sobbing, shaking, clutching at her jacket. He couldn't have been more than 9 years old, just a child. Someone's son, someone's entire world. The sounds were moving away now, the chase continuing down the block and around another corner. In the sudden relative silence, Emily could hear the boy crying, could hear her own ragged breathing, could hear the rain still falling steadily. "Are you hurt?" she asked him, pulling back just enough to look at his face. "Did anything hit you?" He shook his head, unable to speak, his eyes locked on her shoulder. Emily looked down and saw the dark stain spreading across her jacket, almost black in the dim light. Her right arm wasn't working properly, hanging useless at her side. Somewhere in the distance, she heard voices shouting, more vehicles approaching. The boy heard them too, his head snapping toward the sound. "They're coming," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They're coming for me." Emily didn't know who they were, the people in the first vehicle or the second, rescuers or another threat. But she saw the fear in this child's eyes, and something in her gut told her to move. "Can you stand?" she asked. He nodded. Using her left arm and drawing on reserves she didn't know existed, Emily pulled them both to their feet. The pain was extraordinary, making her head swim and her stomach turn. She could feel something warm running down her arm, soaking into her clothes. "Listen to me," she said, gripping the boy's shoulder with her good hand, forcing him to focus on her face instead of the chaos around them. "You're going to be okay. Do you understand? You're going to be fine. You're bleeding," he said, his voice small and terrified. "You're bleeding because of me." "No," Emily said firmly, though speaking was becoming harder. "Not because of you. Never because of you. This isn't your fault." More vehicles were arriving now, skidding to stops at the end of the block. Car doors slammed. Men's voices called out, sharp and urgent. Emily heard someone shouting a name. "Ethan! Ethan Blake!" with desperate intensity. The boy, Ethan, started to turn toward the voices, but Emily held him for one more second. "You're going to be safe now," she told him. "Whoever those people are, they're looking for you. They're going to take care of you." "But what about you?" Ethan asked, tears still streaming down his face. "You saved me. You got hurt saving me." Emily managed a smile, though it cost her. "I'm going to be fine. You just be a good kid, okay? Be safe. Be happy." The voices were getting closer, flashlight beams cutting through the rain. Emily heard heavy footsteps running toward them. She let go of Ethan and stepped back, into the shadows of the doorway. The boy reached for her, but she shook her head. "Go," she whispered. "Go to them." And then, using the last of her strength and the cover of darkness and rain, Emily slipped away. She moved back along the building, into the narrow alley that ran behind the storefronts. putting distance between herself and the scene as quickly as her failing body would allow. Behind her, she heard Ethan calling out, "Wait! The lady! Where's the lady?" But she kept moving. Emily didn't understand what had just happened. She didn't know who that boy was or why someone would target a child. She didn't know if the men who arrived were there to protect him or harm him. All she knew was that she'd done what any decent human being would do. She'd protected a child from danger, and now she needed to survive. The alley spun around her. Emily pressed her left hand against the brick wall, using it to steady herself as she moved. Every step was agony. Her shoulder screamed, and she could feel herself getting weaker, the blood loss starting to take its toll. Her apartment. She just needed to get to her apartment. It was close, so close. She couldn't go to a hospital, couldn't afford it, couldn't answer the questions they'd ask, couldn't risk getting involved in whatever that had been. Emily emerged from the alley onto a parallel street, 1 block over from the chaos. She forced herself to walk normally, to not draw attention, even though every movement felt like fire in her veins. 1 block, then another. Her building finally came into view, and she nearly cried with relief. The stairs were torture. 3 floors had never seemed so high. Emily left a trail of water and blood behind her, but there was nothing she could do about that now. She reached her door, fumbled with her keys using only her left hand, and finally, blessedly, got inside. The door closed behind her, and Emily slid down against it to the floor. Her small studio apartment, the cracked linoleum, the second-hand furniture, the single window that faced a brick wall, had never looked so beautiful. She sat there for a moment, just breathing, trying to gather strength for what came next. Then, slowly and painfully, Emily pulled herself up and made her way to the bathroom. The face that looked back at her from the mirror was pale, streaked with rain and grime. Her jacket was ruined, soaked through with water and blood. Very carefully, Emily peeled it off, gasping as the movement jolted her injured shoulder. The wound was bad, but not as catastrophic as she'd feared. The bullet, because that's what it had been, she knew that now, had torn through the outer edge of her shoulder, missing bone but tearing muscle and flesh. It was still inside her, or it had passed through. She couldn't tell and didn't have the knowledge to know the difference. What she did know, from a childhood spent in neighborhoods where people couldn't always afford doctors, was basic first aid. She knew how to clean wounds, how to stop bleeding, how to survive when survival was all you could manage. Emily ran the shower until the water was as hot as she could stand, then carefully cleaned the wound. The pain was indescribable, making her bite down on a towel to keep from screaming. She used the cheap vodka she kept under the sink as disinfectant, then bandaged herself as best she could with gauze and medical tape from her meager first aid kit. By the time she finished, Emily was shaking with exhaustion and shock. She pulled on clean clothes, a loose sweatshirt that didn't press on the bandages, and collapsed onto her bed. Sleep should have been impossible, but her body had other ideas. As consciousness began to fade, Emily's last thoughts were of the boy, Ethan. Those terrified eyes, the way he'd clung to her, the sound of his voice calling after her. She'd saved him. Whatever else happened, whatever consequences came from this night, she'd saved a child's life. That had to mean something. That had to be enough. Meanwhile, across the city in a penthouse that overlooked Lake Michigan, Jonathan Blake held his son and tried to control the rage burning through his veins. Ethan was safe, physically unharmed, but the boy wouldn't stop crying, wouldn't stop talking about the lady who'd saved him. Jonathan was 40 years old and had built an empire through careful control and calculated decisions. He'd taken over his father's business at 25 and expanded it beyond anyone's expectations. He controlled territory, commanded loyalty, and had earned a reputation that made stronger men step aside when he entered a room. But none of that had protected his son tonight. The attempt on Ethan's life had been bold and unexpected. His enemies had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. There would be consequences for that, severe and permanent. Jonathan would make sure of it. But first, there was the matter of the woman. "Tell me again," he said quietly, his hand stroking Ethan's dark hair as the boy sat curled against him on the leather sofa. "Tell me exactly what happened." "I was so scared, Dad," Ethan whispered, his voice hoarse from crying. "I didn't know what to do, and then she came out of nowhere. She grabbed me and covered me with her body. I heard the noise and she got hurt, but she didn't let go. She kept saying I was going to be okay." Jonathan's jaw tightened. A stranger, a random woman who'd seen his son in danger and had risked her own life without hesitation. What did she look like? Jonathan asked, though his men had already given him what little description they could. In the chaos and darkness, no one had gotten a clear look at her. She had brown hair, kinda wet from the rain, Ethan said, closing his eyes as if picturing her. She was wearing a jacket, like a worker's jacket, and her eyes were nice, Dad. Even though she was hurt, her eyes were nice. She told me it wasn't my fault. What wasn't your fault? That she got hurt. She said it wasn't because of me. Fresh tears spilled down Ethan's cheeks. But it was, Dad. She got hurt because she saved me. And then she just left. Marcus said she disappeared before anyone could help her. What if she... She's alive, Jonathan said with certainty, though he had no way of knowing for sure. She got away, which means she was strong enough to move. We'll find her. Promise? Ethan looked up at him with those wide, trusting eyes that were so much like his mother's. I promise, Jonathan said. I will find her, Ethan. And when I do, I'll make sure she knows how grateful we are. After Ethan finally fell asleep, Jonathan made his way to his office and sat in the leather chair behind his massive desk. Chicago stretched out below him, a sea of lights that represented his domain. He picked up his phone and made a call. Marcus, he said when his head of security answered, I want every camera in that area pulled and analyzed. Every business, every traffic light, every doorbell. I want witness statements from everyone who was on those streets tonight. Someone saw her clearly. Someone knows something. Already on it, boss, Marcus replied. But it was dark, rainy, chaotic. She moved fast. She was wounded, Jonathan said, which means she either went to a hospital or went to ground somewhere local. Check emergency rooms within a 5-mile radius discreetly and canvass the neighborhood. Someone like that, someone brave enough to do what she did. That's not the first time she's helped people. People will know her. What are you thinking? Jonathan was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city. I'm thinking that someone risked their life for my son without knowing who he was, without expecting anything in return. I'm thinking that kind of person is rare, and I'm thinking that in my world debts like this don't go unpaid. Understood, we'll find her. Yes, Jonathan said softly. You will. Because I need to look this woman in the eye and understand what kind of person runs toward danger instead of away from it. He ended the call and sat in the darkness of his office thinking about his son's words. Her eyes were nice, Dad. Jonathan Blake had spent 20 years building walls around himself and his family, creating layers of protection and distance between them and the rest of the world. He'd learned early that trust was a liability, that kindness was weakness, that in his business you survived by being harder and more ruthless than everyone else. But tonight, a stranger had shattered all his carefully constructed defenses with a single act of selfless courage, and Jonathan Blake needed to know why. The morning after came too quickly, and with too much pain. Emily woke to pale November sunlight filtering through her thin curtains and the immediate crushing awareness of her injured shoulder. Every breath sent sharp reminders through her body. She lay still for a long moment, staring at the water-stained ceiling of her studio apartment, trying to convince herself to move. Her phone alarm had been going off for 10 minutes. She had a shift at the diner starting in 2 hours. Slowly, carefully, Emily sat up. The bandages she'd applied the night before were soaked through, tinged with red. She needed to change them, clean the wound again, and somehow figure out how to function well enough to work. Because not working wasn't an option. Not working meant no money. No money meant no rent, no food, no survival. In the bathroom mirror, she looked worse than she felt, which was saying something. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her skin had a grayish pallor, but Emily had worked through worse. Through flu and migraines and the exhausting weight of grief after her mother died. She could work through this too. She changed the bandages with trembling hands, gritting her teeth against the pain. The wound looked angry and inflamed but not infected. Not yet. Small mercies. She took 3 ibuprofen from a bottle she kept for headaches, knowing it wouldn't be nearly enough, but it was all she had. Finding something to wear proved challenging. Most of her shirts would show the bulk of the bandages or would hurt too much to put on. She finally settled on a loose black long-sleeved t-shirt, and her work apron would cover most of it. If she moved carefully, if she favored her left side, if she was lucky, maybe no one would notice. The walk to Rosie's diner took twice as long as usual. Emily had to stop 3 times to rest, leaning against buildings and trying to look casual, like she was just checking her phone instead of fighting off waves of dizziness. The morning was cold and bright. Chicago waking up to a Thursday that looked exactly like every other Thursday, as if the entire world hadn't shifted off its axis the night before. When she finally pushed through the diner's door, the familiar smells of coffee and bacon grease hit her like a wall of normalcy. Rosa was behind the counter preparing for the morning rush and looked up with a smile that quickly shifted to concern. "Emily, you look terrible. Are you sick?" "Just didn't sleep well," Emily said, forcing her voice to sound normal as she tied on her apron with one hand, keeping her right arm close to her body. "I'm fine, really. You sure? Because if you need to go home..." "I'm fine," Emily repeated, more firmly this time. "Let me take the morning tables. I'll be okay once I get moving." Rosa looked skeptical but nodded. The diner couldn't afford to turn away workers, even ones who looked half dead. They were perpetually understaffed, and Thursday mornings were always busy with the pre-work crowd. The shift was torture. Every time Emily lifted a coffee pot, every time she carried a tray, every time she reached for anything, pain shot through her shoulder like electricity. She learned to move in new ways, to compensate with her left side, to smile through gritted teeth when customers asked for refills or extra napkins. "You okay, honey?" asked Mrs. Patterson, one of the regulars who came in every morning for oatmeal and black coffee. "You're moving kind of stiff today." "Slept wrong," Emily said, pouring her refill. "You know how it is. Getting older, everything hurts." Mrs. Patterson laughed, and Emily moved on to the next table, the next order, the next moment of endurance. It was during the mid-morning lull, when Emily was refilling salt shakers with her left hand, that she heard the news report from the television mounted in the corner. The local morning show was on, and the anchor's serious expression caught her attention. "Last night's incident on the south side has police investigating what they're calling a case of reckless driving that endangered several residents. No serious injuries were reported, though witnesses say they heard what sounded like fireworks or car backfiring. Police are asking anyone with information to come forward." Emily's hands stilled on the salt shaker. They were downplaying it, making it sound like nothing more than dangerous driving. No mention of a child in danger. No mention of a woman who'd been injured. Nothing about what had really happened. "You watching that?" Rosa appeared beside her, wiping down the counter. "Crazy stuff. Right in our neighborhood, too. Jerry, you know Jerry from the bodega? He said he saw the whole thing. Said there were two cars chasing each other like something out of a movie. Said he thought he saw someone get hurt, but then police showed up and suddenly nobody saw anything." She shook her head. "That's how it is around here, you know? People learn not to see things." Emily nodded slowly, her mind racing. Someone had control over the narrative. Someone had made sure the news reports would minimize what happened, would discourage witnesses from talking. That took power. That took resources. Who was that little boy? And why would someone want to hurt him badly enough to chase him through city streets? Earth to Emily. Rosa waved a hand in front of her face. "You sure you're okay? You've been spacey all morning." "Sorry," Emily said, shaking herself back to the present. "Just tired. Really, really tired." The rest of the day passed in a blur of pain and exhaustion. Emily mechanically went through the motions of her job, taking orders, serving food, cleaning tables. When her shift finally ended at 3 o'clock, she collected her tips, $47, which would have to stretch for groceries and bus fare, and started the slow walk home. She was half a block from her building when she noticed the car, a dark sedan parked across the street with tinted windows. It wouldn't have meant anything normally. There were always cars parked on city streets, but something about it made the hair on the back of Emily's neck stand up, the way it was positioned, the fact that the engine was running, a thin stream of exhaust visible in the cold air. Emily kept walking, fighting the urge to look back. When she reached her building, she climbed the stairs as quickly as her injured body would allow, and went straight to her window. Carefully staying back from the glass, she peered down at the street. The sedan was still there. Her heart began to pound. Was she being paranoid? Or was someone actually watching her building? Emily let the curtain fall back and sat on her bed, trying to think. If someone was looking for her, how would they have found her? She'd been so careful last night, slipping away in the confusion. But she'd been bleeding, leaving a trail. And Chicago's South Side wasn't that big. If someone had resources and determination, no, she was being ridiculous. The car was probably just someone waiting for a friend, or a rideshare driver between calls. Emily was letting fear and pain make her imagine things. She changed her bandages again, took more ibuprofen and tried to eat some crackers, though she had no appetite. Then, because she couldn't help herself, she went back to the window. The sedan was gone. Emily released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. See? Paranoid. She was just paranoid and exhausted and hurting. But that night, as she tried to sleep, every sound in the building made her jump. Every car that passed on the street below made her wonder. And when she finally did drift off, she dreamed of dark eyes full of terror, of a small hand gripping her jacket, of a voice crying out for the lady. Across the city, in his penthouse office, Jonathan Blake studied the photographs spread across his desk with the intensity of a general planning a campaign. Security camera footage, enhanced and printed, 3 different angles of the intersection where the incident had occurred. In one, you could barely make out a figure running toward Ethan. In another, 2 shapes on the ground by the storefront. In the third, grainy and distant, a woman disappearing into an alley. "That's the best we have?" Jonathan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Marcus stood on the other side of the desk, his expression frustrated. The rain, the darkness, the angle of the cameras, none of them got a clear shot of her face. But we're working on it. We've got people canvassing every business, every residence in a 6-block radius. And the hospitals? Nothing. No one matching her description came into any emergency room within 20 miles. She either treated herself or went somewhere off the grid. Jonathan picked up one of the photos, studying the blurred image of the woman. She'd been wearing dark clothing, nothing distinctive. Medium height, medium build. Could have been anyone. Except she wasn't just anyone. She was the person who'd saved his son's life. "What about witnesses?" Jonathan asked. "That's where it gets interesting," Marcus said, pulling out a small notebook. "We've talked to about 40 people so far. Most claimed they didn't see anything. Standard neighborhood response. But 3 people mentioned seeing a woman who works at a diner near the scene. One of them said she walks that route home every night after closing." Jonathan's attention sharpened. "Which diner?" "Place called Rosie's. Small family operation. Been there for about 30 years. We're being discreet, boss, like you said. Just asking casual questions, not pushing too hard." "Good." Jonathan stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Lake Michigan. The water was gray and choppy under an overcast sky. "I want to know everything about that diner. Who works there, what their schedules are, everything. But Marcus," he turned to face his security chief, "I want this done carefully. No intimidation, no pressure. Just information. Understood?" "Understood." Marcus hesitated. "Boss, can I ask why we're taking it so slow? We could have someone at that diner in an hour, could have answers by tonight." Jonathan was quiet for a moment. "Because whoever this woman is, she ran away. She didn't wait for thanks or payment. She didn't try to leverage what she did. That tells me she's either scared or she doesn't want to be found. And if she's scared, the last thing I want is to make it worse by coming at her with force." "You're assuming she knew who Ethan was?" "No," Jonathan said slowly. "I'm assuming she didn't. I think she saw a child in danger and reacted. No calculation, no agenda. Just," he struggled for the word, "instinct, decency." Marcus looked skeptical. "In my experience, people always want something." "Yes," Jonathan agreed. "Which is why I need to understand this woman. Because either she's genuine, which would be remarkable, or she's playing a longer game than I can see, which would be dangerous." After Marcus left, Jonathan remained at the window, his mind working through scenarios and possibilities. Somewhere in this city was a woman who'd taken a bullet meant for his son. She was hurt, possibly seriously. She was hiding, probably scared, and she had no idea that Jonathan Blake's entire organization was now focused on finding her. The door to his office opened and his son appeared, still in his pajamas despite it being late afternoon. Ethan hadn't gone to school today. Jonathan had kept him home, partly for safety and partly because the boy had barely slept. "Dad?" Ethan's voice was small. "Did you find her?" Jonathan held out his arm and Ethan came to stand beside him at the window. "Not yet, but I will." "What if she's really hurt? What if she needs help?" "Then we'll help her," Jonathan promised. "As soon as we find her, we'll make sure she gets whatever she needs." Ethan was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city. "I keep thinking about her face. She was scared, Dad, I could tell. But she didn't run away. Everyone else was running away or hiding, but she ran toward me." Jonathan felt something tighten in his chest. His son was 9 years old and had already learned that the world was a dangerous place, that people were often motivated by fear and self-interest. But last night, a stranger had shattered that lesson with a single act of selfless courage. "Some people are like that," Jonathan said quietly. "Rare, but they exist. People who see someone in trouble and can't help but try to make it better." "Like Mom was?" Ethan asked. The mention of his late wife sent a familiar ache through Jonathan. "Yes, like your mother was." Catherine Blake had died 4 years ago. A car accident that had nothing to do with Jonathan's business and everything to do with cruel random chance. She'd been the one person who'd seen past his reputation, who'd believed there was something worth loving underneath all the control and calculation. Her death had hollowed him out in ways he was still discovering. "I think Mom would have liked her," Ethan said. "The lady who saved me. I think they would have been friends." Jonathan pulled his son closer, resting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "I think you're right." That evening, Jonathan did something he rarely allowed himself to do. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and took out a small wooden box. Inside were photographs of Catherine, their wedding day, vacations they'd taken, candid moments captured when she wasn't looking. In one photo, she was at a homeless shelter where she'd volunteered, serving food to people who had nothing. In another, she was kneeling in a garden teaching Ethan how to plant seeds. In a third, she was laughing at something outside the frame, her whole face lit up with joy. Catherine had tried to make him better. She'd believed that his business didn't define him, that he could be both the man who ran an empire and the man who chose kindness when it mattered. After she died, Jonathan had let that belief die with her. But now, because of a stranger's courage, he found himself wondering if Catherine had been right all along. Emily's second day back at work was somehow worse than the first. The pain in her shoulder had intensified, a deep, throbbing ache that no amount of over-the-counter medicine could touch. She'd developed a low-grade fever, sweating through her shirt by noon despite the diner's air conditioning. "That's it," Rosa said, physically taking the coffee pot from Emily's left hand. "You're going home. Now, before you collapse on my floor." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've been pale and shaky for 2 days. You're clearly sick with something. Go home, rest, and don't come back until you can stand without wobbling." Emily wanted to argue, but a wave of dizziness made the room tilt. Rosa was right. She needed to rest, needed to properly treat her wound, needed to stop pretending she was okay when she clearly wasn't. "Okay," she conceded, "but I'll be back tomorrow." "We'll see," Rosa said firmly. "Go. I'll have Maria cover your tables." The walk home took forever. Emily had to stop 5 times, each break longer than the last. By the time she reached her building, she was shaking and exhausted, ready to collapse. She was fumbling with her keys at the building's entrance when she heard footsteps behind her. Emily turned, her heart suddenly racing. A man stood on the sidewalk, tall and well-dressed in a dark coat, looking directly at her. For a moment their eyes met. Then he pulled out a phone and appeared to make a call, his gaze never leaving her face. Emily's hands shook harder. She finally got the door open and practically fell inside, letting it slam behind her. She didn't wait for the elevator, couldn't risk being trapped in that small space. Instead, she climbed the 3 flights of stairs, her vision swimming. At her apartment door, she looked back down the stairwell. Was that a shadow moving? Footsteps on the stairs below? Emily got inside her apartment and locked the door, then pushed her small dresser in front of it for good measure. It wouldn't stop anyone determined, but it might slow them down. It might give her warning. She sank onto her bed, trembling. Was she losing her mind? Or was someone really following her? Her phone rang, an unknown number. Emily stared at it, watching it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then it stopped. Seconds later, it rang again. Same unknown number. With shaking hands, Emily answered. "Hello?" Silence on the other end. Not dead silence. She could hear breathing, hear faint background noise. Someone was there. "Who is this?" Emily asked, her voice steadier than she felt. More silence. Then a click. The call ended. Emily dropped the phone like it had burned her. Her heart was pounding so hard she felt sick. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. Someone was looking for her. Someone knew where she worked, where she lived. Someone was watching. But why? What did they want? The boy. It had to be about the boy. But she didn't know anything. She couldn't identify anyone from that night. She'd barely seen anything in the chaos and darkness. She was no threat to anyone. Unless they didn't know that. Unless they thought she'd seen something important. Something worth silencing her over. Emily pulled her knees to her chest, ignoring the protest from her injured shoulder. She was alone in a small apartment with no security system, no weapon, no way to protect herself. If someone wanted to get to her, there was nothing she could do to stop them. For the first time since that night, Emily truly questioned whether saving that boy had been worth it. She'd done what she thought was right, had acted on pure instinct. But now she was hurt, scared, and possibly in real danger. And for what? For a child she didn't know, whose name she'd only learned because he'd called it out as she fled? But then she remembered his face, those terrified eyes, the way he'd gripped her jacket, the sound of his voice saying, "It's not your fault." Yes, Emily thought, even knowing what it had cost her, even facing whatever was coming, it had been worth it, because that's what decent people did. They helped, they protected, they did the right thing even when the right thing was hard. Her phone rang again. Same unknown number. This time Emily didn't answer. She turned off the phone completely and sat in her apartment as afternoon faded to evening, listening to every sound, wondering if each footstep in the hallway was coming for her door. Outside her window, the city carried on as usual, uncaring and indifferent to the terror of one woman in a small apartment. And somewhere in that same city, Jonathan Blake's people were getting closer, narrowing the search, following the trail that would inevitably lead them to Emily Carter's door. The hunt was on, and Emily didn't even fully understand that she was the prey, or that the hunter might not be an enemy at all. Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat propped against her headboard, listening to every sound in the building. Footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, the couple arguing 2 floors up, the distant wail of sirens that never seemed to stop in this part of Chicago. Her shoulder throbbed with a deep, persistent pain that made her nauseous. The fever had gotten worse. She knew she needed proper medical attention, but fear kept her paralyzed. Going to a hospital meant questions, meant records, meant being visible when all she wanted was to disappear. When dawn finally broke, pale and gray through her window, Emily had made a decision. She couldn't stay in Chicago. She'd take the money she had saved, barely $300, and buy a bus ticket somewhere far away. Start over. Leave this life and these problems behind. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. She waited until 7 o'clock, then called the diner. Rosa answered on the 3rd ring, her voice already stressed from the morning rush. "Rosie's Diner, how can I—" "Rosa, it's Emily." "Emily, are you feeling better? Because I really need you today. Maria called in and we're completely—" "I can't come in," Emily interrupted. "I'm sorry. I know you need me, but I have to leave town. Family emergency." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Family emergency? Emily, you don't have any family. At least you've never mentioned anyone." Emily closed her eyes. Rosa was right, of course. In 6 years of working together, Emily had never talked about family because there was none to talk about. "It's complicated," she said. I need to go. I'm sorry for the short notice." "Honey, what's going on?" Rosa's voice shifted from stressed to concerned. "This isn't like you. Are you in some kind of trouble?" "No, no trouble. I just need to leave. Please, Rosa. Thank you for everything. You've been good to me." "Emily, wait." But Emily ended the call. Her hands were shaking again, though whether from fever or fear or exhaustion she couldn't tell. She started gathering her meager belongings. Some clothes, her important documents, the photograph of her mother she kept by the bed. She was stuffing things into an old backpack when someone knocked on her door. Emily froze. The knock came again, firm, but not aggressive. 3 measured raps. "Emily Carter?" A man's voice, deep and calm. "My name is Marcus Chen. I'm not here to hurt you, I just want to talk." Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. She said nothing, didn't move. "I know you're in there," the voice continued, "and I know you're scared, but I promise you're not in any danger. Not from me, not from the people I work for. We just want to talk to you about what happened 3 nights ago." "Go away," Emily managed to say, hating how her voice shook. "I don't know anything. I didn't see anything. Just leave me alone." "You saved a child's life," Marcus said. "His father wants to thank you. To help you, that's all. I don't want help. I don't want thanks. I just want to be left alone." There was a pause. Then, "You're hurt. We know you were injured that night. Let us get you medical attention. Proper care. No questions. No involvement with authorities. Just treatment." How did they know she was hurt? Had they been following her? Watching her? The thought made Emily's stomach turn. "Please go away," she said, louder this time. "I don't want anything from you or the people you work for." Another pause. Longer this time. "Miss Carter, the father of the boy you saved is Jonathan Blake. That name might not mean anything to you, but in this city, it means he has resources. He has influence. And right now, he's using all of it to find you and make sure you're okay. You can talk to me now, on your terms, or eventually this conversation will happen anyway. But I promise you it will be easier if you let it happen now." Emily knew that name. Jonathan Blake. Everyone in Chicago knew that name, even if they pretended not to. He was mentioned in whispers, in news reports that carefully danced around what he actually did. He was power and danger wrapped in expensive suits, and she'd saved his son. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know who he was. I just saw a child in danger. I know, Marcus said, his voice gentler now. That's exactly why Mr. Blake wants to meet you. Because you didn't know and you helped anyway. Emily slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her back against the door that separated her from this man who'd found her despite all her efforts to hide. Her shoulder screamed in pain. Her head felt light and heavy at the same time. She was so tired of being scared, so tired of hurting. If I talk to him, she said slowly, will he leave me alone after that? Will all of you just let me go back to my life? I can't make that promise, Marcus admitted. But I can tell you that Mr. Blake is not a man who forces people into situations they don't want. He wants to thank you, to help you if you'll let him, and to understand why you did what you did, that's all. Emily didn't believe that was all. Men like Jonathan Blake didn't become powerful by being kind and walking away. But what choice did she have? They'd found her. They knew where she worked, where she lived. Running wouldn't change that. Okay, she said finally. I'll talk to him, but not here. Somewhere public. Somewhere with people around. Of course. Mr. Blake suggested the diner where you work, actually. Rosie's. He thought you might feel more comfortable there. The diner. Her territory. Rosa would be there. Other staff. Customers. It was as safe as anywhere could be. When? Emily asked. Is today too soon? Emily almost laughed. Everything was happening too fast, spinning out of her control. But delaying wouldn't change anything. This afternoon, she said. 2 o'clock. After the lunch rush. 2 o'clock, Marcus confirmed. Thank you, Miss Carter. And for what it's worth, what you did for that boy, for Ethan, that took real courage. Ethan. The boy had a name she'd already known but hadn't let herself think about. Ethan Blake, 9 years old. Someone's entire world. After Marcus left, Emily sat on her floor for a long time trying to process what had just happened. Then she forced herself to stand, to clean and rebandage her wound, to find clothes that didn't make her look like she was dying even though that's how she felt. At 1:30, she made her way to Rosie's diner. The walk seemed surreal, like moving through a dream. Chicago carried on around her, people rushing to appointments, cars honking, the L train rumbling overhead, completely unaware that Emily's small, careful life was about to change forever. Rosa looked up in surprise when Emily walked in. Emily, I thought you were leaving town. Change of plans, Emily said. Can I use the back booth for a meeting? It's important. Rosa's eyes narrowed with concern, but she nodded. Sure, honey. Whatever you need. Emily sat in the booth that faced the door, her back to the wall. An old instinct from childhood. Always know who's coming. Always have a way out. She ordered coffee she didn't drink and watched the clock tick toward 2. At exactly 2 o'clock, the door opened and a man walked in. Jonathan Blake didn't look like what Emily had expected. She'd imagined someone older, harder, obviously dangerous. But the man who entered Rosie's diner looked like he could have been a lawyer or a businessman, dressed in dark slacks and a charcoal sweater under a wool coat. He was tall, probably 6'1" or 6'2", with dark hair touched with gray at the temples. His face was handsome in a sharp, angular way, but it was his eyes that caught her attention, dark and intensely focused. Those eyes scanned the diner and found her immediately. He walked over without hesitation, moving with the kind of confidence that came from always being the most powerful person in any room. Emily Carter? He asked, his voice deep and measured. Yes. Emily didn't stand, didn't offer her hand. She just watched him with the same wariness she'd give to any predator. May I sit? She nodded, and Jonathan Blake slid into the booth across from her. Up close, Emily could see the fine lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw that suggested he smiled rarely. He studied her with the same intensity she was using on him. You're hurt, he said finally. It wasn't a question. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're pale. You're favoring your left side. And I'd bet money you're running a fever right now. Emily's jaw tightened. I'll manage. You saved my son's life, Jonathan said quietly. You don't have to manage alone anymore. I don't want anything from you, Mr. Blake. Jonathan, please. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. And I understand you don't want anything. That's unusual. In my experience, everyone wants something. Well, I'm not everyone. A ghost of something, amusement, respect, flickered across his face. No, you're clearly not. Rosa appeared with a coffee pot, her eyes darting between them with obvious curiosity. Coffee? Please, Jonathan said, pushing the cup toward her. After she left, he continued. I need to understand something, Miss Carter. You saw a child in danger. You didn't know who he was, didn't know if helping him would bring trouble down on you. But you did it anyway. Why? Emily stared at him, trying to understand the question. Why? Because he was a child. Because someone was trying to hurt him. What else would I do? Most people would run. Most people would look away. Self-preservation is a powerful instinct. Maybe I'm not most people, Emily said, echoing his earlier words back to him. Jonathan Blake was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those dark, penetrating eyes. Emily held his gaze, refusing to look away, even though everything in her wanted to. My son hasn't slept properly since that night, Jonathan said finally. He keeps waking up from nightmares, and when I ask him what he dreams about, you know what he says? He says he dreams that you weren't there, that no one came to help him, that he was alone. Emily felt something crack in her chest. I'm sorry he's having nightmares, but he's safe now. That's what matters. He wants to meet you, Jonathan said, to thank you properly, to know that you're okay. No, Emily said immediately. Absolutely not. Mr. Blake, Jonathan, I appreciate that your son wants to thank me, but the best thing for both of us is to forget this ever happened. He goes back to his life, I go back to mine, and we pretend we never crossed paths. And what life is that? Jonathan asked, gesturing around the diner. Working yourself into exhaustion for minimum wage? Living in an apartment where the locks barely work? Treating a serious injury by yourself because you can't afford proper medical care? Emily's face flushed with anger. How dare you judge my life? You don't know anything about me. You're right, Jonathan said, his voice softening slightly. I don't, but I'd like to, because anyone who would risk their life for a stranger's child, who would disappear rather than ask for thanks or payment, who would sit here trembling with fever and pain but still have the courage to tell me no, that's someone worth knowing. Why? Emily challenged. Why does it matter to you? Your son is safe. You've found me. You've said thank you. What else is there? Jonathan leaned forward, his hands wrapped around the coffee cup he hadn't drunk from. Do you know what my son said about you? He said your eyes were kind. In the middle of chaos and danger and fear, he noticed that your eyes were kind. And that matters to me because in the world I live in the life I've built, kindness is rare. Genuine kindness is almost non-existent. People smile because they want something. They help because they expect something in return. But you didn't want anything. You just saw someone who needed help and you helped. That's just being a decent human being, Emily said. Exactly, Jonathan replied. And do you have any idea how rare that is? How powerful that is? Emily didn't know how to respond to that. She looked down at her coffee, at her reflection distorted in the dark liquid. Let me help you, Jonathan said. Medical care at minimum. I know people. Doctors who are discreet, who won't ask questions. Let me at least do that much. And if I say no, then I'll respect that. But I'll also continue to worry that the woman who saved my son's life is suffering because of that choice. Emily looked up at him, searching his face for deception or manipulation. But all she saw was sincerity. And somehow that was more frightening than any threat would have been. I don't understand you, she admitted. I don't understand what you want from me. I want to know that you're okay, Jonathan said simply. I want my son to be able to sleep at night knowing that the woman who saved him is safe and healthy. And selfishly, I want to understand how someone can be that selfless in a world that teaches us all to look out for ourselves first. Before Emily could respond, the door to the diner burst open and a small figure came running in. Dad! Ethan Blake's voice rang out across the diner. I saw your car. I told Marcus to stop. The boy froze as his eyes found Emily. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the woman who'd saved him and the child she'd protected. Then Ethan was moving, running toward their booth. Jonathan started to rise to intercept him, but Ethan was too fast. He reached Emily and threw his arms around her neck before anyone could stop him. It's you, he sobbed into her shoulder, her injured shoulder making Emily gasp with pain. It's really you. I thought I'd never see you again. Emily's arms came up automatically, wrapping around the crying child despite the agony in her shoulder. Hey, it's okay. I'm here. You're okay. You left, Ethan said, pulling back just enough to look at her face, tears streaming down his cheeks. You saved me and then you left and I didn't even know your name. I didn't get to say thank you. You don't need to thank me, Emily said softly, using her left hand to wipe the tears from his face. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do, Ethan insisted. You got hurt because of me. Dad said you got hurt really bad, and it's all my fault. No, Emily said firmly, holding his face between her hands and making him look at her. Listen to me, Ethan. What happened to me was not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I did what any good person would do. Okay? But you're hurt. I'll heal, Emily promised, even though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Bodies are tough. They fix themselves. Ethan wiped his eyes and studied her face with that intense focus children have. You really have kind eyes, he said. I told Dad, but I wasn't sure I remembered right. But you do. Emily felt tears prick her own eyes. She looked up at Jonathan, who was standing beside the booth, watching this reunion with an expression she couldn't quite read. I'm sorry, Jonathan said. I told him to wait in the car. He's stubborn when he sets his mind to something. I wonder where he gets that from, Emily said dryly. A hint of a smile touched Jonathan's mouth. A mystery. Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking apologetic. Sorry, boss. He was out of the car before I could stop him. It's fine, Jonathan said, though his eyes never left Emily and Ethan. Ethan was still standing close to Emily, holding her good hand. Will you come have dinner with us? He asked. Please? Dad makes really good pasta, and we have a big apartment with windows that look out at the lake, and I could show you my room and my drawings. I drew pictures of you, of that night, to help me remember. Ethan, Jonathan said gently, that's a lot to ask. Emily might have other plans. I don't, Emily heard herself say. The words came out before she could stop them, before her rational mind could intervene. I don't have other plans. She didn't know why she said yes. Maybe it was the hope in Ethan's eyes. Maybe it was the exhaustion that made everything seem surreal anyway. Maybe it was because for the first time in years, someone had looked at her and seen something worth knowing, worth protecting, worth caring about. Or maybe, Emily thought as she saw the surprise and gratitude flash across Jonathan Blake's face, maybe it was because despite everything she knew about him, despite the danger and the complications and the vast gulf between their worlds, she wanted to understand these people who'd turned her life upside down. Really? Ethan's face lit up. You'll come? Really, Emily confirmed. But I need to go home first, to change and clean up. I'll have Marcus drive you, Jonathan said immediately, and drive you to my home afterward, unless you'd prefer to meet us there. Emily looked at Marcus standing respectfully by the door, then back at Jonathan. He's not going to wait outside my apartment and report on everything I do, is he? No, Jonathan said, though I understand why you'd worry about that. Marcus will drive you home, wait in the car, and then take you wherever you want to go. Your word? My word, Jonathan said seriously. Emily nodded slowly. Okay. As she stood to leave with Marcus, Jonathan touched her arm gently. Emily, thank you for saying yes. It means more than you know. Emily looked at him, this powerful man who controlled half of Chicago's underworld, who could have forced this meeting or demanded her compliance, but instead he'd asked. He'd respected her right to say no. He'd shown her something she hadn't expected. Humanity, vulnerability, gratitude. Don't thank me yet, Emily said. I haven't decided if this is the worst decision I've ever made. That ghost of a smile returned to Jonathan's face. Fair enough. As Marcus drove her home through Chicago's afternoon traffic, Emily stared out the window at the familiar streets and wondered what she'd just agreed to. Dinner with a man whose reputation made hardened criminals nervous. Time with a child who'd already crawled into her heart in the space of 5 minutes. She was walking into danger. She knew that. Jonathan Blake's world was not her world, could never be her world. But for one evening, maybe she could give a frightened little boy some peace. Maybe she could look Jonathan Blake in the eye and understand what kind of man could be both feared and loving, both dangerous and desperate to do right by his son. And maybe, just maybe, Emily would discover something about herself in the process, about the kind of person she wanted to be, about the courage it took not just to save a life, but to let that life touch hers in return. The city rushed past her window, vast and indifferent. Somewhere ahead was Jonathan Blake's penthouse where worlds would collide and lives would change. Emily just hoped she was strong enough to survive what came next. Marcus dropped Emily back at the diner at 7 o'clock sharp, just as the evening crowd was beginning to thin. She'd spent the afternoon in her apartment, changing into the nicest clothes she owned, a simple navy blue dress she'd bought at a thrift store years ago, and a cardigan that hid her bandaged shoulder. She'd done what she could with her appearance, though the mirror reflected back a woman who still looked pale and exhausted. The drive to Jonathan Blake's building was surreal. They left the familiar streets of the South Side and headed north, toward the gleaming high-rises that lined Lake Michigan. Emily watched as the neighborhoods transformed, from corner stores and aging brownstones to designer boutiques and doormen in uniforms. "First time in this part of the city?" Marcus asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "I've been up here before," Emily said, "just never inside any of these buildings." Marcus pulled up to a glass tower that seemed to touch the clouds. A valet immediately approached, opening Emily's door before she could do it herself. "Miss Carter," the valet said with a respectful nod, as if he'd been told exactly who she was and when to expect her. "Welcome." The lobby was all marble and modern art, the kind of space that made Emily hyper-aware of her thrift store dress and worn shoes. But Marcus guided her to a private elevator without seeming to notice her discomfort. "Penthouse level," he said, pressing a button that required a keycard. "Mr. Blake is looking forward to seeing you again." The elevator was faster than any Emily had experienced, making her stomach drop as they rose. When the doors opened, they revealed a small, elegant hallway with only one door. Marcus knocked twice and the door opened almost immediately. Jonathan stood there, and Emily was struck by how different he looked from the man in the diner. He'd changed into dark jeans and a simple gray sweater, his feet bare. He looked younger, more relaxed, almost like a normal person. "Emily," he said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice. "Thank you for coming. Please, come in." Emily stepped inside and stopped, unable to help her reaction. The penthouse was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Chicago and Lake Michigan beyond. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, reflecting off the water in brilliant streaks. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It is," Jonathan agreed, coming to stand beside her at the windows. "I've lived here for 5 years, and I still sometimes forget to appreciate it. You see something every day and it becomes background noise. I could never get used to this," Emily said. "This view alone is worth, well, more than I make in a year." "Money doesn't buy happiness," Jonathan said, and there was something sad in his voice. "It buys security, comfort, opportunity, but not happiness." Before Emily could respond, Ethan came running from somewhere deeper in the apartment. He'd changed too, now wearing pajamas with spaceships on them, his hair still damp from a bath. "Emily, you came. I told Dad you'd come, but he said maybe you'd change your mind. And I said no way because you promised and you seem like someone who keeps promises." The words tumbled out in one excited breath. Emily smiled despite her nervousness. "You're right, I do keep my promises. Come see my room." Ethan grabbed her good hand and started pulling her toward a hallway. "I have all my drawings there, and my books, and my telescope. Do you like stars?" "I love stars." "Ethan," Jonathan interrupted gently, "let Emily catch her breath, and dinner is almost ready." "After dinner?" Ethan asked hopefully. "After dinner," Emily confirmed. The dining room was less formal than Emily had expected, with a table that could seat 12 but was set for just 3, clustered at one end. Jonathan had made pasta, just as Ethan had promised, and the smell reminded Emily that she hadn't eaten properly in days. "I hope you like carbonara," Jonathan said, bringing out plates. "It's one of the few dishes I can make without disaster." "It smells amazing," Emily said honestly. As they ate, the conversation flowed more naturally than Emily had anticipated. Ethan dominated much of it, telling Emily about his school, his friends, his favorite books. He was bright and animated, so different from the terrified child she'd met 3 nights ago. "Ethan's in an advanced program at his school," Jonathan explained. "He's already reading at a 7th grade level." "Dad," Ethan groaned. "Don't be embarrassing. I'm proud of you," Jonathan said simply. "That's not embarrassing, that's fact." Emily watched them together. The way Jonathan's whole face softened when he looked at his son, the way Ethan instinctively leaned toward his father. Whatever Jonathan Blake was in the outside world, in this apartment he was simply a father who loved his child. "Your dad tells me you draw," Emily said to Ethan. "I'd love to see your work." Ethan's face lit up. "Really? Most adults just pretend to be interested." "I'm really interested," Emily assured him. After dinner, Ethan led Emily to his room, which was exactly what a 9-year-old boy's room should be. Organized chaos with books stacked everywhere, model rockets on shelves, and drawings covering one entire wall. "That's you," Ethan said, pointing to a drawing near the center. From that night, Emily stepped closer. The drawing showed two figures, one large and one small, on a dark street. The larger figure was wrapped around the smaller one, protecting them. Despite the childlike style, there was something powerful about the image. "You're really talented," Emily said. "Dad says art helps us process our feelings," Ethan said, suddenly sounding older than his years. "After Mom died, I drew a lot of pictures. It helped." Emily's heart ached. "I lost my mom too, 3 years ago." Ethan looked up at her with understanding beyond his years. "Does it get easier?" "Yes and no," Emily said honestly, sitting on the edge of his bed. "The pain gets quieter. You learn to carry it, and you remember the good things more than the sad things." "I try to remember Mom's laugh," Ethan said softly, "but sometimes I worry I'm forgetting what it sounded like." "That's normal," Emily assured him. "But the love doesn't fade. That stays forever." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Ethan said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Were you scared that night when you ran to help me?" Emily considered lying, making herself seem braver than she'd been. But this child deserved honesty. "I was terrified," she admitted. "I didn't think about it really. I just saw you in danger and my body moved before my brain could tell it to stop. But yes, I was very scared." "But you did it anyway," Ethan said. "That's what Dad says bravery is. Being scared but doing the right thing anyway. Your dad is a smart man." "He is," Ethan agreed. "But he's sad a lot. He tries to hide it, but I can tell. He's been less sad since we found you, though. I think meeting you helped him remember something." Before Emily could ask what that meant, Jonathan appeared in the doorway. "Ethan, it's almost bedtime," he said. "But Emily just got here." "And Emily will visit again," Jonathan said, then looked at Emily. "If she wants to." "I'd like that," Emily found herself saying, surprising herself with how much she meant it. After Ethan was tucked in, a process that involved 2 stories, 3 glasses of water, and multiple promises that Emily would come back, Jonathan led her to the living room, where the view of the city at night was even more spectacular. "Would you like something to drink?" he asked. "Coffee, tea, wine?" "Tea would be nice," Emily said, settling carefully onto a sofa that probably cost more than her entire apartment's worth of furniture. Jonathan returned with 2 cups and sat in a chair across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Thank you for being so patient with Ethan," he said. "He's been through a lot in his short life, and he doesn't warm up to people easily. But with you, it's like he's known you forever." "He's a special kid," Emily said. "You're doing a good job with him." "I try," Jonathan said. "Single parenting isn't what I planned for my life, but it's what I got, and he's the best thing in my world." "He mentioned his mother," Emily said carefully. "I'm sorry for your loss." Jonathan was quiet for a moment, staring at his tea. "Catherine died 4 years ago. Car accident. Wrong place, wrong time. No conspiracy, no enemies, just bad luck. Sometimes I think that's the cruelest part. In my world, I can plan for threats and protect against enemies, but I couldn't protect her from chance." "I understand," Emily said. "My mother's cancer came out of nowhere too. One day she was fine. 3 months later she was gone. Life doesn't always make sense." "No," Jonathan agreed. "It doesn't." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights below. Then Jonathan said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Emily tensed. "Okay. Your shoulder. How bad is it really?" Emily's hand instinctively moved to her injured shoulder. "It's fine, Emily." Jonathan's voice was gentle but firm. "I've seen enough injuries in my life to know when someone is in serious pain. You've been favoring your left side all evening. You gasped when Ethan hugged you. And unless I'm very wrong, you're running a fever right now." Emily looked away toward the windows. "I can't afford a hospital, and I can't answer the questions they'd ask." "What if those weren't obstacles?" Jonathan asked. "What if I told you I have a doctor who could see you tonight, who wouldn't ask any questions about how you were injured, who would provide the best care possible?" "And what would that cost me?" Emily asked, meeting his eyes. "Nothing," Jonathan said, "except letting me help you. Letting me do the one thing I can do to thank you for saving my son's life." "I don't want to owe you anything," Emily said. "You wouldn't owe me. If anything, I owe you. Emily, you took a hit that was meant for Ethan. You're suffering because you protected him. Please let me help. Not as payment, not as obligation, just as one human being helping another." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. She was so tired of hurting, So tired of being scared, so tired of doing everything alone. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Jonathan pulled out his phone and made a call. Dr. Chen? It's Jonathan Blake. I need you at my apartment. Now. Yes, it's urgent. Thank you. Within 30 minutes, an elegant woman in her 50s arrived carrying a medical bag. Dr. Lisa Chen was professional and kind, examining Emily's shoulder in Jonathan's guest bathroom with practiced efficiency. You did a decent job with the initial treatment, Dr. Chen said, but this needs proper cleaning, antibiotics, and monitoring. You're lucky. The bullet passed through without hitting bone or major vessels, but infection is setting in. Emily winced as the doctor cleaned and treated the wound properly. Will I need surgery? No, but you'll need to be careful. Rest, antibiotics, proper care, and you should have come to me days ago. Dr. Chen looked at her seriously. This could have gotten much worse. After she left, Emily emerged from the bathroom to find Jonathan waiting in the hallway, concern etched on his face. She gave me antibiotics and pain medication, Emily said, holding up the prescription bottles. Said I should be fine if I take care of it properly. You'll stay here tonight, Jonathan said. It wasn't quite a command, but it wasn't quite a request either. I can go home. Emily, you can barely stand. You've been running on adrenaline and stubbornness for 3 days. You need rest, proper rest, and I have 4 guest bedrooms sitting empty. Please. Emily wanted to argue, but another wave of exhaustion hit her. The pain medication Dr. Chen had given her was already making her feel foggy. Just tonight, she said. Just tonight, Jonathan agreed. He showed her to a guest room that was larger than her entire apartment, with a bed that looked impossibly comfortable, and an ensuite bathroom with actual marble counters. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you, Jonathan said. My sister visits sometimes and leaves things here. If you need anything at all, I'm just down the hall. Thank you, Emily said. For everything. For dinner. For the doctor. For understanding. Jonathan paused at the door. Emily, can I tell you something? She nodded. When Catherine died, I thought the capacity for surprise was gone from my life. I thought I'd seen everything, experienced everything, that nothing could catch me off guard anymore. But you've proven me wrong. You surprised me. Your courage, your kindness, your refusal to want anything in return. You reminded me that there are still good people in the world, that there are still people worth protecting and worth knowing. Emily didn't know what to say to that. They stared at each other across the elegant guest room, 2 people from completely different worlds who'd been thrown together by chance and choice. Good night, Jonathan, she finally said. Good night, Emily. That night, for the first time since the incident, Emily slept deeply and without nightmares. When she woke, late morning sun was streaming through the windows and she could hear voices from somewhere in the apartment. She found clothes in the closet as Jonathan had promised. Expensive casual wear that fit reasonably well. She felt strange wearing someone else's clothes in someone else's home, but her own clothes were ruined. Following the voices, she found Jonathan and Ethan in the kitchen. Ethan was eating cereal and doing homework at the counter while Jonathan read something on his tablet. Emily! Ethan jumped up when he saw her. Dad said you were staying. Are you staying today too? Can you help me with my math homework? Dad's terrible at fractions. I am not terrible at fractions, Jonathan protested, but he was smiling. Good morning, Emily. How did you sleep? Better than I have in days, she admitted. Thank you. Are you hungry? I can make breakfast. The next few hours passed in a domestic normalcy that felt surreal. Emily helped Ethan with his homework while Jonathan made phone calls from his office. Marcus stopped by with some kind of report, giving Emily a respectful nod. It was like being in a bubble separate from the real world. But reality intruded when Jonathan's phone rang with a call that made his expression harden. I need to take this, he said. Emily, could you stay with Ethan? I'll just be a few minutes. Emily nodded and Jonathan disappeared into his office, closing the door. She could hear his voice through the door, sharp and commanding, reminding her that this man was not just a single father making breakfast. He was Jonathan Blake, a man who controlled territories and commanded loyalty through means she didn't want to think about. When he emerged 20 minutes later, his expression was troubled. Ethan, he said, go to your room for a bit, please. I need to talk to Emily alone. Ethan looked between them, concerned, but obeyed. Once they were alone, Jonathan sat across from Emily at the dining table. There's a problem, he said quietly. The people who tried to hurt Ethan, they know about you now. They know you saved him. They're asking questions, looking for you. Emily's blood ran cold. What does that mean? It means your apartment isn't safe anymore. It means going back to your normal life might put you at risk. Jonathan ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry. This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. So what do I do? Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Hide? Run? Look over my shoulder for the rest of my life? No, Jonathan said firmly. You let me protect you. You stay here, where security is tight and no one can get to you. And you let me handle the people who think threatening you is acceptable. Handle them how? Emily asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Permanently, Jonathan said, his voice cold. Then his expression softened. I know what you're thinking. I know what I am, what I do. But Emily, these people crossed a line when they went after my son, and they're crossing another line by threatening you. This isn't negotiable. Emily stood up, pacing to the windows. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Getting pulled into your world, into situations I can't control. I know, Jonathan said, coming to stand beside her. And if I could change it, I would. But I can't. All I can do is protect you the best way I know how. By making me a prisoner in this gilded cage? Emily gestured at the penthouse. By keeping you alive, Jonathan said quietly. Because if something happened to you because you saved my son, I would never forgive myself, and neither would Ethan. Emily closed her eyes. She thought about her small apartment, her job at the diner, her simple life. All of it suddenly felt very far away. How long? She asked. A week, maybe 2. Just until I can resolve the situation. And then you can go back to your life. Or, Jonathan hesitated, or you could consider staying part of ours. Not here, necessarily, but in Ethan's life. He needs positive influences, needs people who see him as just a kid and not the son of Jonathan Blake. And you're good for him. I can't stay in your world, Emily said. That's not who I am. I'm not asking you to be part of my world, Jonathan clarified. I'm asking if you'd consider being part of my son's life. Those are 2 different things. Emily turned to face him. Are they? Can you really separate them? For you, I would try, Jonathan said, and there was something in his voice that made Emily's breath catch. They stood there, inches apart, the city spreading out below them. 2 people from different worlds, connected by a single act of courage and the complicated consequences that followed. I saved a child, Emily said softly. I didn't sign up for any of this. I know, Jonathan said, and I'm sorry, but you saved the only thing in this world that matters to me. That creates a bond whether we want it or not. Before Emily could respond, Ethan appeared in the doorway. Is everything okay? He asked, his young face creased with worry. You both look serious. Jonathan and Emily exchanged a glance. Then Emily smiled and walked over to the boy. Everything's fine, she said. Your dad and I were just talking about grown-up stuff, very boring. Oh, Ethan said, visibly relieved. So you're staying? For a while? Emily looked at Jonathan over Ethan's head. He met her gaze steadily, waiting for her answer. She thought about her choices, about the life she'd had and the life that was being offered. She thought about this child who'd crawled into her heart, and the man who was both dangerous and devoted. She thought about courage, and how sometimes the bravest thing you could do was not run toward danger but stay and face the complicated aftermath. Yeah, Emily said, ruffling Ethan's hair. I'm staying. For a while. The smile that broke across Ethan's face was worth every complication, every fear, every uncertainty about what came next. Can we watch a movie? Ethan asked. We have a theater room with a huge screen and everything. A theater room? Emily raised an eyebrow at Jonathan. Really? He shrugged, almost sheepish. Ethan wanted it. As Ethan dragged her toward the theater room, chattering about his favorite movies, Emily caught Jonathan watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes. Relief, certainly. But something else too. Something that looked almost like hope. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange suspension of reality. Emily stayed in Jonathan's penthouse, living in luxury she'd never imagined while trying to maintain who she was. She helped Ethan with homework, played board games, and listened to his stories about school and friends. Jonathan kept a respectful distance most of the time, but Emily noticed things. The way he'd smile when he heard her laughing with Ethan. The way he'd make sure her favorite tea was always stocked. The way he'd ask about her shoulder, her comfort, her needs. How's the situation? Emily asked him one evening after Ethan was in bed. The people you were worried about? Resolved, Jonathan said simply, and Emily knew better than to ask for details. So I can go home? You can, Jonathan confirmed. Whenever you're ready. Though, He hesitated. I hope you'll still visit. For Ethan's sake. Just for Ethan's sake? Emily asked before she could stop herself. Jonathan met her eyes. No, not just for Ethan's sake. The air between them suddenly felt charged with possibility. Emily knew she should step back, should maintain the boundaries that had kept her safe. But instead she found herself saying, I'd like to keep visiting, if that's okay. It's more than okay, Jonathan said softly. When Emily finally moved back to her apartment, which Jonathan had insisted on having thoroughly secured, she found that her life had irrevocably changed. She still worked at the diner, still lived in her small studio, still walked the same streets. But now she had Sunday dinners at a penthouse, had a 9-year-old boy who called her when he needed help with homework, had a complicated man who looked at her like she was something precious and worth protecting. Rosa noticed the change immediately. You're different, she said one day at the diner. Lighter somehow. Did you meet someone? Emily thought about how to answer that. She'd met 2 someones, actually. A boy who'd reminded her that courage mattered, and a man who'd shown her that people were more than their reputations. Yeah, she said finally. I guess I did. 3 months after that night in the rain, Emily stood at Jonathan's windows, watching Chicago spread out below. Ethan was doing homework at the dining table, occasionally calling out questions. Jonathan was in his office, handling business she didn't ask about. Her shoulder had healed, leaving only a small scar. But the other changes ran deeper. Emily had learned that life could expand in unexpected ways, that connections could form across impossible divides, that sometimes the scariest thing was not running toward danger, but opening your heart to possibility. Emily? Ethan called. Can you help me with this problem? Coming, she called back. As she turned from the window, she caught Jonathan watching her from his office doorway. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face, and Emily smiled back. She had saved a boy's life one rainy night in October. She'd expected nothing in return, but what she'd received was everything. A family that wasn't hers by blood but by choice. A home that wasn't hers by ownership but by belonging. And the understanding that sometimes the most important moments in life came from split-second decisions made with an open heart. Emily had run toward danger to protect a stranger's child, and in doing so, she'd found the family she'd been missing all along. The debt, it turned out, had never been Jonathan's to pay. It had been life's gift to both of them, a second chance at connection, at trust, at building something good from a moment of chaos. As Emily settled in to help Ethan with his homework, with Jonathan joining them at the table and the 3 of them working together in comfortable companionship, she realized something important. She'd saved Ethan that night in the rain, but in all the ways that mattered, they'd saved her right back.